A haunting secret comes to light when Jimin touches the hidden wound Jungkook never showed the world. Unraveling pain, loyalty, and a fragile hope for healing. "Don't touch that," Jungkook said too late, his breath breaking as Jimin's fingers brushed the scar he had hidden even from himself. The room smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked concrete, the kind of smell that clung to memory. Emergency lights hummed above them, flickering like a heartbeat struggling to stay steady. Jungkook stood with his back to the wall, shirt half open, knuckles white as if he could hold himself together by force alone. Jimin was already there, too close, eyes sharp not with curiosity but recognition. Like he'd seen this kind of pain before and knew it didn't disappear just because you pretended it wasn't there. Jungkook had survived the stage, the cameras, the screaming crowds that loved him for all the right reasons and none of the real ones. What he hadn't survived cleanly were the nights after, when silence pressed harder than any spotlight. The scar on his ribs was thin but cruel, a reminder of a moment when strength had failed and pride had almost killed him. He never told anyone how it happened. He told the world he was fine. He told himself the same lie until it sounded like truth. Jimin didn't ask what it was. He didn't step back when Jungkook flinched. He simply rested his palm there, warm and grounding, as if touch itself could translate what words never could. The contact was brief, respectful, devastating. Jungkook's breath stuttered, and something unguarded cracked open in his eyes. "You carry it like it's punishment," Jimin said quietly, voice low enough that it couldn't echo. "Not like it's something you survived." Jungkook laughed, a short, hollow sound. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Jimin replied. His gaze didn't waver. "You disappear in the quiet, you joke too fast when it gets real, and you never let anyone see where it hurts." Rain began to hit the windows harder, drumming a rhythm that felt uncomfortably like a countdown. Jungkook slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold floor, head bowed. The world had always demanded resilience from him, and he had given it willingly, proudly. But resilience was expensive. It took its payment in private. "It wasn't supposed to happen," Jungkook said, words spilling out as if they'd been waiting for permission. "I thought I could handle it, I always think I can." Jimin crouched in front of him, close enough that Jungkook could see the faint scar near Jimin's eyebrow, the one he never covered with makeup. Proof that everyone had their own quiet battles. "You don't have to be unbreakable," Jimin said. "You just have to be honest with someone who won't leave." The confession didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments, missed calls, a locked door, a night when fear had won. Jimin listened without interrupting, without judgment. He listened like this was sacred, like Jungkook's pain deserved reverence instead of shame. When the words finally ran out, the room felt different. Lighter somehow. Jungkook realized his hands had stopped shaking. Jimin hadn't fixed anything. He hadn't promised miracles or easy endings. He had only stayed present and unflinching, and that felt revolutionary. Jungkook looked up. "Why are you doing this?" Jimin smiled, soft and unwavering. "Because you never ask for help, and because someone once did the same for me." Outside, the rain eased into a whisper. The emergency lights steadied. Jungkook pulled his shirt closed, not to hide the scar this time, but to protect something newly fragile inside his chest. For the first time in a long while, the wound didn't feel like a sentence. It felt like a beginning. And in that quiet, with no cameras and no applause, Jungkook understood that healing didn't start when the pain disappeared. It started when someone saw it, and stayed. The door slammed harder than it needed to, the echo ripping through the hallway like a gunshot. "What the hell was that back there?" Jungkook snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. He didn't turn around, he couldn't. If he did, Jimin would see how badly his hands were shaking. Jimin didn't answer immediately. His footsteps were slow, deliberate, each one measured as if he were stepping through a minefield. "You mean when you almost lost control in front of everyone," he said calmly, "or when you lied straight to my face afterward?" Jungkook spun around then, eyes blazing. "You had no right to touch me like that." "I had every right," Jimin shot back, the heat finally breaking through his composure. "Because you were bleeding and pretending it was sweat." The hallway smelled like metal and old paint, a forgotten corridor backstage where voices carried too easily. Somewhere far away, staff laughed, unaware of the war unfolding in this narrow space. Jungkook stepped closer, invading Jimin's air, his voice dropping into something dangerous and raw. "You don't get to decide when I'm weak," Jungkook said. "You don't get to expose me." Jimin didn't retreat. If anything, he leaned in, eyes dark with something far more intense than anger. "I didn't expose you," he said. You exposed yourself the moment you started drowning and refused to grab the hand right in front of you. Silence slammed down between them, heavy and suffocating. Jungkook's jaw tightened. He hated that Jimin was right. He hated even more that Jimin had seen him at his worst and hadn't looked away. You think you understand me, Jungkook said bitterly, because you touched a scar. I understand more than you want, Jimin replied. I see how you punish yourself every time you think you failed. I see how you push until your body breaks just to prove you're still worthy. That word hit harder than any accusation. Worthy. Jungkook laughed again, but there was no humor in it. That's the job, Jimin. The fans don't want cracks. The company doesn't want cracks. You think there's room for weakness where we live. There's room for honesty, Jimin said, his voice trembling now, not with fear but with emotion he could no longer cage. Or there should be. And if there isn't, then something is deeply wrong with the world we're protecting. Jungkook turned away, dragging a hand through his hair. His chest felt too tight, his lungs refusing to work properly. Memories clawed their way up, hospital lights, the taste of blood, the moment he'd realized no one was coming because he'd told everyone he was fine. You don't know what happens when I let go, he muttered. I fall apart. Jimin stepped closer again, close enough that Jungkook could feel his breath. Then fall, he said quietly, just not alone. The words cracked something open. Jungkook swallowed hard, his defenses finally splintering under the weight of everything he'd carried in silence. If this gets out, he said, voice low and shaking, if they find out how bad it really is, it could destroy everything. Jimin's expression softened, but his resolve sharpened. Or it could save you, he said. And if it costs me comfort, safety, or reputation to make sure you survive, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. Jungkook stared at him, stunned. Why, he whispered, why would you risk that? Jimin hesitated just for a second, and in that pause lay a truth far more dangerous than anger. Because watching you disappear is worse, he admitted. And because somewhere along the way your pain started to feel personal. A shout echoed from the far end of the corridor, calling Jungkook's name, reality knocking, demanding the mask again. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a new kind of fear, one that came from being seen too clearly. Don't do this to me, he said softly. Don't make me choose. Jimin met his gaze, unwavering. I'm not asking you to choose, he said. I'm asking you to live. Jungkook exhaled shakily, the fight draining out of him. For the first time he didn't pull away when Jimin rested a steadying hand on his shoulder. The world outside was loud, relentless, unforgiving, but in this narrow, hidden space something dangerous and undeniable had taken root. Not desire, not comfort. Truth. The rehearsal room exploded with sound the moment Jungkook stepped inside. Music blaring, dancers counting beats, managers shouting cues. But none of it reached him. His head was still back in that narrow hallway, still trapped in Jimin's voice telling him to live like it was an accusation and a promise at the same time. Jungkook, you're late, the manager barked. I know, Jungkook replied flatly, dropping his bag. His eyes searched the room on instinct, landing on Jimin across the mirror-lined space. Jimin was stretching, calm on the surface, but when their eyes met, something electric snapped between them, unfinished, unresolved. They danced like nothing was wrong. That was the cruelest part. Their bodies moved in perfect sync, years of discipline overriding the chaos underneath. But every time Jimin came too close, every time Jungkook felt the brush of his arm or caught his reflection beside him, his pulse spiked dangerously. During a break, Jungkook finally lost it. Stop looking at me like that, he hissed under his breath as they stood near the water bottles. Like what? Jimin replied, unscrewing the cap with infuriating calm. Like you know something you shouldn't. Jimin leaned closer, voice low and cutting. I do know something I shouldn't, and you know what's worse, you're relieved. Jungkook's throat tightened. You're imagining things. Am I? Jimin challenged. Then why did you almost miss your cue just now? That hit too close. Jungkook slammed the bottle down harder than necessary. A few heads turned. Tension rippled through the room. Enough, Jungkook snapped. You don't get to psychoanalyze me in front of everyone. Jimin's eyes flashed, then stop unraveling in public. Silence fell, thick and uncomfortable. The manager cleared his throat, forcing a laugh and calling everyone back to position, but the damage was done. Whispers followed them like shadows. Later, backstage, the confrontation became unavoidable. You're pushing me, Jungkook said, voice shaking with restrained fury. And I don't know if it's because you care or because you want to break me. Jimin's composure finally cracked. You think this is easy for me, he shot back. Watching you destroy yourself while smiling for cameras, pretending I don't see you counting breaths like they might run out. Jungkook turned away, chest heaving. I never asked you to watch. But I did, Jimin said softly. I always did. The words landed heavy, charged with years of unsaid things. Jungkook laughed bitterly. So what now, you're my savior? No, Jimin said firmly. I'm your mirror and you hate what you see. Jungkook spun around, eyes burning. You don't know how deep this goes. Then tell me, Jimin demanded, voice breaking through the last wall. Stop protecting a lie that's killing you. The confession came like a rupture. Jungkook spoke of panic attacks before performances, of nights spent staring at ceilings convinced he'd failed everyone, of that moment when pain felt like control and silence felt safer than honesty. His voice trembled, then broke completely. I thought if I endured it quietly, he whispered, it would disappear. Jimin stepped closer, eyes glossy. Pain doesn't disappear when you hide it, he said, it just waits. Jungkook covered his face, shoulders shaking. This was worse than any scandal, worse than any headline, being seen like this, raw and unguarded. Jimin didn't touch him this time. He gave him space, respect, something Jungkook rarely allowed himself. When Jungkook finally looked up, his eyes were red but clearer. If this gets out, he said quietly, they'll tear me apart. Jimin nodded. Maybe, he said, but they'll never hurt you as much as you've been hurting yourself. That truth settled between them, heavy but grounding. The next day, the world shifted. An internal meeting, closed doors, serious faces. Jungkook sat stiffly as concerns were raised, missed cues, visible strain, rumors starting to circulate. Every word felt like a nail. Then Jimin spoke. He needs rest, Jimin said calmly, and support, not pressure. The room froze. Jungkook's head snapped toward him. Jimin. I'm serious, Jimin continued, unwavering. We push too hard, we ignore warning signs, and one day we'll lose someone. The silence was deafening. This was dangerous, controversial, career-threatening. Afterward, Jungkook cornered him. Are you trying to ruin us? I'm trying to save you, Jimin replied without hesitation. Something shifted then, not dramatically, not explosively, but deeply. Jungkook realized this wasn't about weakness or strength anymore. It was about survival, about choosing truth over performance, even if it terrified him. That night, alone in his room, Jungkook traced the scar on his ribs, not with shame this time, but with acknowledgement. For the first time, he didn't look away from it. He wasn't healed, not even close. But he wasn't alone anymore. The hotel room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made every breath feel loud and suspicious. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the carpet like it might confess something before he had to. His phone lay face down beside him, vibrating intermittently with messages he wasn't ready to read. A knock broke the silence. He didn't answer. The knock came again, firmer this time. I know you're in there, Jimin said through the door. His voice wasn't gentle. It wasn't angry either. It was controlled in a way that made Jungkook's chest tighten. Go away, Jungkook muttered. The door opened anyway. Jimin stepped inside and closed it behind him, locking it with a quiet click that sounded far louder than it should have. You don't get to disappear after what happened today, he said. Not with me. Jungkook let out a harsh laugh. You really enjoy pushing me into corners, don't you? If I wanted to corner you, Jimin replied coolly, I would have done it in that meeting. I didn't. Jungkook stood abruptly, turning on him. You spoke for me without asking. Because if I asked, Jimin shot back, you would have said no and kept bleeding quietly. The words slammed into the room like thrown glass. Jungkook's jaw tightened. You think you're the only one risking something here, he snapped. If they think I can't handle this, if they decide I'm a liability. They won't, Jimin interrupted. You don't know that. I know enough, Jimin said, stepping closer. I know they've built an image around you that doesn't leave room for being human, and I know you've been killing yourself trying to protect it. Jungkook turned away, fists clenched. That image is everything, he said bitterly. It's not just mine, it belongs to the fans, to the team, to you. Jimin laughed sharply. Don't put this on me. You benefit from it too, Jungkook said, spinning back around. You stand next to me on that stage, you shine because I don't fall. The accusation hung heavy between them. Jimin's eyes darkened. If that's what you think, he said slowly, then you don't know me at all. Jungkook scoffed, then explain it to me. Jimin exhaled, running a hand through his hair. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but far more dangerous. I've watched you disappear piece by piece, he said. I've watched you smile while your hands tremble. I've listened to you joke about being tired when I know you haven't slept. And every time I told myself it wasn't my place. He stepped closer, close enough now that Jungkook could feel the heat of him. But today, when they started listing your issues like inconveniences, Jimin continued, I realized something. If I stayed silent again, I'd be complicit. Jungkook swallowed hard. You think I don't see the looks, he said. The doubts, they're already there, Jimin, you just made them louder. Good, Jimin said without hesitation. Let them be loud, let them be uncomfortable, because pretending everything is fine is how people break beyond repair. Jungkook's voice cracked. You're asking me to gamble my entire life. No, Jimin said softly. I'm asking you to stop gambling it every single day. The words landed deep, precise. Jungkook felt something give way inside him, a dam he'd reinforced for years finally splintering. I'm scared, he admitted, the confession ripping out of him before he could stop it. I'm scared that if I slow down, if I let them see how bad it gets, I'll be replaced, forgotten. Jimin's expression shifted instantly, the anger dissolving into something raw and achingly sincere. You won't be, he said firmly. And if anyone tries, they'll have to get through me. Jungkook let out a shaky breath. You shouldn't say things like that. Why, Jimin challenged. Because it sounds like loyalty, or because it sounds like something more. The air between them grew heavy, charged with truths neither of them had named aloud before. Jungkook looked away first, heart pounding. This is dangerous, he whispered. Yes, Jimin agreed. But so is pretending we're just co-workers who don't notice when the other one is falling apart. Jungkook sank back onto the bed, exhaustion crashing into him all at once. Jimin sat beside him, leaving just enough space to breathe. After a long silence, Jungkook spoke again. If I tell them the truth, he said, staring at his hands, I don't know who I'll be without the mask. Jimin glanced at him. Then we figure it out, he said simply, together. Jungkook looked up, eyes glossy. You really believe that? I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Something shifted then, subtle but profound. Not a solution, not a miracle, just an agreement to stop lying. Jungkook nodded slowly. Okay, he said, no more pretending. Jimin allowed himself a small, relieved smile. That's all I wanted. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in this small room. Jungkook leaned back, closing his eyes for the first time that day without bracing for impact. The fear was still there, the consequences still real. But for once, he wasn't facing them alone.